"You will marry the stable hand," said Lady Shine, "or you will sign the deed. You have until Friday, and I would remind you that Friday is your birthday." The stable hand in question was standing 11 feet away in the passage with a broken bridle over his shoulder, and it was, he reflected, a most unusual way for a man to learn that he was being married off. He did not move. He had learned a great deal in 6 months about the extraordinary things people say in front of a servant, and the first rule of it was that a servant does not move. His name, as far as the household at Marbury knew, was Jem Ward. He had come in April with a plain letter of character and a good hand with a difficult horse, and had been given the loft over the harness room and £9 a year, and nobody had asked him another question since. His name was in fact Orlando, and he was the 9th Duke of Hollingcote, and he owned rather more of the county than the Chains had ever set foot on. He had not begun this as a joke. He had begun it in February, 3 days after he stood behind a pillar at a ball and heard his own betrothed explain to her sister, in a spirit of great good humour, that Hollingcote was tolerable enough, that his rent roll was 11,000 a year, and that a woman could shut her eyes and think of the London house. He made no scene. He released her handsomely and then sat in his library for a night and a day with a question a man of his rank is not supposed to ask: whether there existed anywhere on earth a woman who would have him for himself. There was no way to find out except one, and so he had gone and got himself a place in a stable 40 miles from anyone who knew his face. He had meant to stay a month. He had been at Marbury half a year, and the reason was standing at present in the morning room being told she would marry him. Leonora Chain was 24 on Friday. Her father, Sir Marcus, had died 2 years since and had left, with the best intentions and the worst lawyer in the county, a will requiring his daughter to be married by that birthday. Failing which, the whole of Marbury and the £12,000 that went with it passed to his widow and her issue. Lady Shane was the widow. Her issue was Miss Cassandra, who was 19 and looked at people the way a cat looks at a window. They had been very careful. Orlando had watched them do it from the yard, the way one watches weather come over a hill. 2 respectable offers had been made for Leonora in 18 months, and both gentlemen had gone away after a private half-hour with Lady Shane, one of them looking as though he had been told something shameful. The girl was kept from the assemblies on grounds of economy. Letters went astray. And now here was Friday, and here was a stepmother offering her stepdaughter the 2 remaining doors, a hireling husband, which would satisfy the will and ruin her in the county forever, or a signature that handed over everything. "I should think," Lady Chain was saying pleasantly, "that a young woman kept and clothed on my late husband's money might have the grace not to look so tragic. Ward is a clean, sober man and will be no trouble at all. You may live in the north rooms." Orlando went out and split kindling for 40 minutes, which was the only thing that presented itself. That evening Lady Shine sent for him. He stood in the small study with his hat in his hands and his eyes down, in the character of Jem Ward, and was offered £50. It is a formality. You will stand up in church, and you will sign, as paper says you may claim upon the property or her person, and will remove yourself to Ipswich within the month. £50 is a great deal of money to a man of your sort. "It is, ma'am," said Orlando, who had that morning received a letter from his steward concerning the sale of 600 acres in another county. He signed it in a careful, laborious hand and took the £50 and put it in his pocket, and did not permit one muscle of his face to move, and he thought, folding the paper away, that he had never been given so useful a document by so confident a person. He half expected the girl to come and rage at him. Instead, she came out to the stables at 9 o'clock at night with a lantern, alone, and found him rubbing down the grey. "Ward, miss, put that down and look at me, please." She set the lantern on the corn bin. She was very pale and her voice was perfectly level. "You have been told what my stepmother intends. I have come to say that I will not have it, and that you are to leave, tonight if you like. I have £4 of my own, and you may have all of it, and I will write you a character in my own hand that will get you a place anywhere in England." Orlando straightened up slowly. "And Friday, miss. Friday will take care of itself. You will lose the house." "I shall lose the house," she agreed. "I have thought about it a great deal, and I find I can live in a cottage on £40 a year and be perfectly content, and I find I cannot live at all if I have bought my father's house by having man dragged to an altar like a beast to a fair. You did not ask for this. Nobody has consulted you once. You are a man, Ward, not a punishment, and I will not be the person who makes you into one. Her chin came up. So go, and do not think of me at all after Wednesday, 'cause I promise you I shall be quite well. The lantern hissed. Somewhere in the dark the grey shifted his feet. Orlando had been 6 months looking for the answer to a question, and had found it standing in a cold stable in a mended shawl, offering him £4 and her whole inheritance to go away. "No, miss," he said. "I beg your pardon?" I said no. He put the cloth down on the manger. "If you'll have me, I'll stand up with you Friday. Not for the £50, that's gone into the poor box already, and the vicar can make of it what he likes. I'll do it because I'd sooner be married to you in a cottage than free of you in a palace, and because I've watched that woman take everything off you for 2 years, and I have a great fancy to see her fail." Leonora Shane looked at him a long moment across the lantern light, and her eyes filled, and she mastered it. "You do not know me," she said. "I know you better than anyone in that house does," said Orlando, and it was the truest thing he had said in 6 months. "Friday, then. And Miss Shane, before you take a vow to me, you shall have the whole truth about the man you are taking it with. Every word of it. I will give you that on our wedding night, and you may do as you please with it." She frowned slightly, not understanding him, and he did not explain, and she picked up the lantern and went back across the westward to the house. They were married at 8 o'clock on Friday morning at Marbury Church, the hour chosen, because at 8 o'clock nobody of any consequence is out of bed. Orlando stood at the rail in a brushed brown coat that had cost him 9 shillings, and beside him Leonora wore grey, not white. She had been told there was no time to have anything made, and carried a few late roses she had cut herself in the dark. Lady Shine sat in the front pew with a handkerchief held to her mouth to hide what was underneath it. Cassandra laughed twice behind her glove, and the second time the vicar stopped and looked at her over his spectacles until she stopped. Leonora asked for the whole service. The vicar had begun on the shortened form, and she said quite clearly, "The whole of it, if you please, sir." And so they had the whole of it, every word, in a cold, empty church at 8 in the morning. And when she made her vows, she made them looking straight at him. In a voice that carried to the back wall, without one tremor of shame, Orlando had been to 4 ducal weddings in his life. He had never seen anything remotely like it. The village came out to watch them leave, because word travels. He heard a woman say, "Sir Marcus's girl," to a groom, and heard the sound a crowd makes when it is enjoying itself, and he felt Leonora's hand tighten once on his arm, and then deliberately loosen. And she walked down that path with her head up and bade good morning by name to 3 people who did not deserve it. Their wedding supper was cold mutton on a tray. Lady Shine had them put in the 2 rooms over the harness room, and said so in front of the servants, and stood in the yard to watch them go up the outside stair. It was, Orlando thought, the last free hour that woman would ever enjoy. The loft was clean, at least. Somebody had put a jug of hedge flowers on the sill, and he knew which of the kitchen maids had done it, and made a note. Leonora took off her bonnet and stood in the middle of the little room with her hands folded, and then said, in a voice she had clearly been rehearsing all day, "I want to say something before anything else. Ma'am, you are not to call me ma'am. You are my husband." She lifted her chin. "I know what this day has cost you, and I mean to be a good wife to you, Jem Ward. I can keep accounts, and I can cook a little, and I shall learn the rest. If we must live on £9 a year, then we shall live on £9 a year, and I will not once, ever say a word to you about what I used to have." Her voice wavered at last. "So you may call me Leonora, and you must not look at me as though you were sorry for me, because I could not bear it from you." Orlando crossed the room. He took her hand. She had a callus on her thumb from cutting roses, and he thought he would remember that particular fact when he was 80, and bent his head and said, very quietly, "Your Grace." She went absolutely still. "I do not understand you." "You are the Duchess of Hollingcote," said Orlando. "You have been since 8:15 this morning, when you married Orlando Hollingcote in that church before 11 witnesses and signed the register beneath his true name." which he entered while your stepmother was busy being amused. He stepped back, because he thought she might want the room. I am not a stable hand. I have never been one. My name is on that register and on the deeds of 11,000 acres 2 counties east of here. I came into this yard in April under a false name to find out whether any woman alive would have me for myself. I have my answer. I got it in the stable on Wednesday night, when you offered me £4 and your father's house to be rid of a marriage you thought would harm me. Leonora sat down on the edge of the bed as though her legs had simply finished with her. Then she said, "You let them do it?" "Yes." "You stood in that yard and let her offer you £50 to take me away, and you let me walk down the church path this morning with the whole village watching, and you knew." Her voice cracked and came back harder. "I have been sick with it for 4 days. I have lain awake working out how to make a life for you on £9 a year, and you knew." "I did," said Orlando, "and there is no defense of it that will hold water, so I shall not attempt one. I could have ended it in a sentence on Monday. I did not, because I wanted a certainty no honest method could have given me, and because after Wednesday night I was afraid that if I told you, you would not have me. That was cowardice, and it was mine, and it is the last lie I shall ever tell you." He knelt down in front of her, which was not a thing he had ever done in his life, and took out of the lining of the 9-shilling coat a heavy gold signet ring with a hollyhock and a crown cut into it, and set it in her lap. "Everything I have is yours from this morning, and was yours before you knew it existed. If you cannot forgive it, say so, and I shall take rooms at the inn and put myself at your disposal until you decide what you want of me." She turned the ring over twice. "Orlando," she said, trying it, "yes, you are quite mad. I have been told so." And then Leonora, Duchess of Hollingcote, in a grey gown, in a loft over a harness room with hedge flowers on the sill, began to laugh and cried while she was doing it, and put both hands flat against his chest as though to be sure of him, and Orlando gathered his wife into his arms and kissed her for the first time, and the small candle on the washstand burned itself out some while later without either of them noticing. The carriage came up the Marbury Drive at 9 the next morning, 4 bays, a coachman and 2 grooms, the hollyhock and crown on the door panels, and behind it a second carriage carrying his steward and Mr. Frayne, his solicitor, who had brought a great many papers and was in an excellent temper. Orlando did not raise his voice once in the morning room. He stood beside his wife and let Mr. Frayne read out, in order, the marriage register of the previous morning, Sir Marcus's will, now satisfied to the letter, the assignment of Marbury and its rents to the sole ownership of Leonora, Duchess of Hollingcote, and last an agreement dated the Wednesday, in which the Duke of Hollingcote had been offered £50 by Lady Shine to marry her stepdaughter, renounce all claim upon her, and remove himself to Ipswich within the month. "That last," said Mr. Frayne comfortably, "is what we call an interesting document." Lady Shine had gone the colour of the tablecloth. Cassandra had stopped looking like a cat. "You will not be prosecuted," said Orlando, "because my wife has asked me not to, and I find it wise to do as she tells me. You will have 300 a year, and you will have it from her hand, not mine. The dower house at Ledworth is empty. You will be out of Marbury by Michaelmas, and when you are asked in the county why your stepdaughter is a duchess, I advise you to answer that she earned it by refusing to sell a man she believed to be a groom. It has the advantage of being true." They went home to Hollingcote in October, and the county talked of nothing else for a 12-month, and Leonora bore it exactly as she had borne the church path, head up, courteous, giving no one the satisfaction. He never did get her out of the habit of coming down to the stables at 9 at night with a lantern. She said it was to see the grey. Orlando knew better, and on the nights he found her there in a shawl, in the smell of hay and leather, in the small hissing light of the lamp. He would put out his hand and she would take it, and after a moment she would say, because it had become the private joke of their marriage and the whole truth of it at once, "Come to bed, Ward." "Yes, your grace," said the Duke of Hollingcote, and followed his wife across the yard.